Matthew Henry's Commentary on the Whole Bible. 2 Samuel 20. How do the clouds return after the rain? No sooner is one of David's troubles over than another arises, as it were out of the ashes of the former, wherein the threatening is fulfilled, that the sword should never depart from his house. 1. Before he reaches Jerusalem, a new rebellion is raised by Sheba, verses 1 and 2. 2. His first work, when he comes to Jerusalem, is to condemn his concubines to perpetual imprisonment, verse 3. 3. Amas, whom he entrusts to raise an army against Sheba, is too slow in his motions, which puts him into a fright, verses 4 to 6. 4. One of his generals barbarously murders the other, when they are taking the field, verses 7 to 13. 5. Sheba is at length shut up in the city of Abel, verses 14 and 15, but the citizens deliver him up to Joab, and so his rebellion is crushed, verses 16 to 22. The chapter concludes with a short account of David's great officers, verses 23 to 26. Sheba's rebellion, 1023 BC. 1. And there happened to be there a man of Belial, whose name was Sheba, the son of Bichri, a Benjamite, and he blew a trumpet, and said, We have no part in David, neither have we inheritance in the son of Jesse, every man to his tents, O Israel. 2. So every man of Israel went up from after David, and followed Sheba the son of Bichri. But the men of Judah clave unto their king, from Jordan even to Jerusalem. 3. And David came to his house at Jerusalem, and the king took the 10 women his concubines, whom he had left to keep the house, and put them in ward, and fed them, but went not in unto them. So they were shut up unto the day of their death, living in widowhood. David, in the midst of his triumphs, has here the affliction to see his kingdom disturbed and his family disgraced. 1. His subjects revolting from him at the instigation of a man of Belial, whom they followed when they forsook the man after God's own heart. Observe, 1. That this happened immediately upon the crushing of Absalom's rebellion. We must not think it strange, while we are in this world, if the end of one trouble be the beginning of another, deep sometimes calls unto deep. 2. That the people were now just returning to their allegiance, when, of a sudden, they flew off from it. When a reconciliation is newly made, it ought to be handled with great tenderness and caution, lest the peace break again before it be settled. A broken bone, when it is set, must have time to knot. 3. That the ringleader of this rebellion was Sheba, a Benjamite by birth, verse 1, who had his habitation in Mount Ephraim, verse 21. Shimei and he were both of Saul's tribe, and both retained the ancient grudge of that house. Against the kingdom of the Messiah there is an hereditary enmity in the serpent's seed, and a succession of attempts to overthrow it, Psalm 2 verses 1 and 2, but he that sits in heaven laughs at them all. 4. That the occasion of it was that foolish quarrel, which we read of in the close of the foregoing chapter, between the elders of Israel and the elders of Judah, about bringing the king back. It was a point of honor that was disputed between them, which had most interest in David. We are more numerous, say the elders of Israel. We are nearer akin to him, say the elders of Judah. Now one would think David very safe and happy when his subjects are striving which shall love him best, and be most forward to show him respect, yet even that strife proves the occasion of a rebellion. The men of Israel complained to David of the slight which the men of Judah had put upon them. If he had now countenanced their complaint, commended their zeal, and returned them thanks for it, he might have confirmed them in his interest, but he seemed partial to his own tribe. Their words prevailed above the words of the men of Israel, as some read the last words of the foregoing chapter. David inclined to justify them, and, when the men of Israel perceived this, they flew off with indignation. If the king will suffer himself to be engrossed by the men of Judah, let him and them make their best of one another, and we will set up one for ourselves. We thought we had 10 parts in David, but such an interest will not be allowed us. The men of Judah tell us, in effect, we have no part in him, and therefore we will have none, nor will we attend him any further in his return to Jerusalem, nor own him for our king. This was proclaimed by Sheba, verse 1, who probably was a man of note, and had been active in Absalom's rebellion. The disgusted Israelites took the hint, and went up from after David to follow Sheba, verse 2, that is, the generality of them did so, only the men of Judah adhered to him. Learn hence, 1. That it is as impolitic for princes to be partial in their attentions to their subjects as it is for parents to be so to their children, both should carry it with an even hand. 2. Those know not what they do that make light of the affections of their inferiors, by not countenancing and accepting it. Their hatred may be feared whose love is despised. 3. The beginning of strife is as the letting forth of water, it is therefore wisdom to leave it off before it be meddled with. Proverbs 17 verse 14. How great a matter doth a little of this fire kindle. 4. The perverting of words is the subverting of peace, and much mischief is made by forcing invidious constructions upon what is said and written and drawing consequences that were never intended. The men of Judah said, "The king is near of kin to us." By this, say the men of Israel, you mean that we have no part in him, whereas they meant no such thing. 5. People are very apt to run into extremes. We have 10 parts in David, said they, and, almost in the next breath, we have no part in him. Today Hosanna, tomorrow crucify. 2. His concubines imprisoned for life, and he himself under a necessity of putting them in confinement, because they had been defiled by Absalom. Verse 3. David had multiplied wives, contrary to the law, and they proved a grief and shame to him. Those whom he had sinfully taken pleasure in he was now one. Obliged in duty to put away, they being rendered unclean to him by the vile uncleanness his son had committed with them. Those whom he had loved must now be loathed. 2. Obliged in prudence to shut up in privacy, not to be seen abroad for shame, lest the sight of them should give occasion to people to speak of what Absalom had done to them, which ought not to be so much as named. 1 Corinthians 5 verse 1. That villainy might be buried in obscurity. 3. Obliged in justice to shut up in prison, to punish them for their easy submission to Absalom's lust, despairing perhaps of David's return, and giving him up for gone. Let none expect to do ill and fare well. Amasa's death, 1023 BC. For then said the king to Amasa, Assemble me the men of Judah within 3 days, and be thou here present. 5. So Amasa went to assemble the men of Judah, but he tarried longer than the set time which he had appointed him. 6. And David said to Abishai, Now shall Sheba the son of Bichri do us more harm than did Absalom. Take thou thy lord's servants, and pursue after him, lest he get him fenced cities, and escape us. 7. And there went out after him Joab's men, and the Cherethites, and the Pelethites, and all the mighty men, and they went out of Jerusalem to pursue after Sheba the son of Bichri. 8. When they were at the great stone which is in Gibeon, Amasa went before them. And Joab's garment that he had put on was girded unto him, and upon it a girdle with a sword fastened upon his loins in the sheath thereof, and as he went forth it fell out. 9. And Joab said to Amasa, Art thou in health, my brother? And Joab took Amasa by the beard with the right hand to kiss him. 10. But Amasa took no heed to the sword that was in Joab's hand, so he smote him therewith in the 5th rib, and shed out his bowels to the ground, and struck him not again, and he died. So Joab and Abishai his brother pursued after Sheba the son of Bichri. 11. And one of Joab's men stood by him and said, He that favoureth Joab, and he that is for David, let him go after Joab. 12. And Amasa wallowed in blood in the midst of the highway. And when the man saw that all the people stood still, he removed Amasa out of the highway into the field, and cast a cloth upon him, when he saw that every one that came by him stood still. 13. When he was removed out of the highway, all the people went on after Joab, to pursue after Sheba the son of Bichri. We have here Amasa's fall just as he began to rise. He was nephew to David, chapter 17 verse 25, had been Absalom's general and commander-in-chief of his rebellious army, but that being routed, he came over into David's interest, upon a promise that he should be general of his forces instead of Joab. Sheba's rebellion gives David an occasion to fulfill his promise sooner than he could wish, but Joab's envy and emulation rendered its fulfillment of ill consequence both to him and David. 1. Amasa has a commission to raise forces for the suppressing of Sheba's rebellion, and is ordered to raise them with all possible expedition. Verse 4. It seems the men of Judah, though forward to attend the king's triumphs, were backward enough to fight his battles, else, when they were all in a body attending him to Jerusalem, they might immediately have pursued Sheba, and have crushed that cockatrice in the egg. but most love a loyalty as well as a religion that is cheap and easy. Many boast of their being akin to Christ that yet are very loath to venture for him. Amasa is sent to assemble the men of Judah within 3 days, but he finds them so backward and unready that he cannot do it within the time appointed. Verse 5, though the promotion of Amasa, who had been their general under Absalom, was very obliging to them, and a proof of the clemency of David's government. 2. Upon Amasa's delay, Abishai, the brother of Joab, is ordered to take the guards and standing forces, and with them to pursue Sheba. Verses 6 and 7, for nothing could be of more dangerous consequence than to give him time. David gives these orders to Abishai, because he resolves to mortify Joab, and degrade him, not so much, I doubt, for the blood of Abner, which he had shed basely, as for the blood of Absalom, which he had shed justly and honorably. Now, says Bishop Hall, Joab smarteth for a loyal disobedience. How slippery are the stations of earthly honors and subject to continual mutability. Happy are those who are in favor with him in whom there is no shadow of change. Joab, without orders, though in disgrace, goes along with his brother, knowing he might be serviceable to the public, or perhaps now meditating the removal of his rival. 3. Joab, near Gibeon, meets with Amasa and barbarously murders him. Verse 8 to 10. It should seem, the great stone in Gibeon was the place appointed for the general rendezvous. There the rivals met, and Amasa, relying upon his commission, went before, as general both of the new raised forces which he had got together, and of the veteran troops which Abishai had brought in, but Joab there took an opportunity to kill him with his own hand, and 1. He did it subtly, and with contrivance, and not upon a sudden provocation. He girded his coat about him, that it might not hang in his way, and girded his belt upon his coat, that his sword might be the readier to his hand. He also put his sword in a sheath too big for it, that, whenever he pleased, it might, upon a little shake, fall out, as if it fell by accident, and so he might take it into his hand, unsuspected, as if he were going to return it into the scabbard, when he designed to sheath it in the bowels of Amasa. The more there is of plot in a sin, the worse it is. 2. He did it treacherously, and under pretense of friendship, that Amasa might not be upon his guard. He called him brother, for they were own cousins, inquired of his welfare, art thou in health? And took him by the beard, as one he was free with, to kiss him, while with the drawn sword in his other hand he was aiming at his heart. Was this done like a gentleman, like a soldier, like a general? No, but like a villain, like a base coward. Just thus he slew Abner, and went unpunished for it, which encouraged him to do the like again. 3. He did it impudently, not in a corner, but at the head of his troops, and in their sight, as one that was neither ashamed nor afraid to do it, that was so hardened in blood and murders that he could neither blush nor tremble. 4. He did it at one blow, gave the fatal push with a good will, as we say, so that he needed not strike him again. With such a strong and steady hand he gave this one stroke that it was fatal. 5. He did it in contempt and defiance of David and the commission he had given to Amasa, for that commission was the only ground of his quarrel with him, so that David was struck at through the side of Amasa, and was, in effect, told to his face that Joab would be general, in spite of him. 6. He did it very unseasonably, when they were going against a common enemy, and were concerned to be unanimous. This ill-timed quarrel might have scattered their forces, or engaged them one against another, and so have made them all an easy prey to Sheba. So contentedly could Joab sacrifice the interest both of king and kingdom to his personal revenge. For Joab immediately resumes his general's place, and takes care to lead the army on in pursuit of Sheba, that, if possible, he might prevent any prejudice to the common cause by what he had done. 1. He leaves one of his men to make proclamation to the forces that were coming up that they were still engaged in David's cause, but under Joab's command. Verse 11. He knew what an interest he had in the soldiery, and how many favored him rather than Amasa, who had been a traitor, was now a turncoat, and had never been successful. On this he boldly relied, and called them all to follow him. What man of Judah would not be for his old king and his old general? But one would wonder with what face a murderer could pursue a traitor, and how, under such a heavy load of guilt, he had courage to enter upon danger. Surely his conscience was seared with a hot iron. 2. Care is taken to remove the dead body out of the way, because at that they made a stand, as chapter 2 verse 23, and to cover it with a cloth, verses 12 and 13. Wicked men think themselves safe in their wickedness if they can but conceal it from the eye of the world. If it be hidden, it is with them as if it were never done. But the covering of blood with a cloth cannot stop its cry in God's ear for vengeance, or make it the less loud. However, since this was no time to arraign Joab for what he had done, and the common safety called for expedition, it was prudent to remove that which retarded the march of the army, and then they all went on after Joab, while David, who no doubt had notice soon brought him of this tragedy, could not but reflect upon it with regret that he had not formerly done justice upon Joab for the death of Abner, and that he now had exposed Amasa by preferring him. And perhaps his conscience reminded him of his employing Joab in the murder of Uriah, which had helped to harden him in cruelty. Sheba pursued, 1023 BC. 14 And he went through all the tribes of Israel unto Abel, and to Beth-maachah, and all the Berites, and they were gathered together, and went also after him. 15 And they came and besieged him in Abel of Beth-maachah, and they cast up a bank against the city, and it stood in the trench, and all the people that were with Joab battered the wall, to throw it down. 16 Then cried a wise woman out of the city, Hear, say, I pray you, unto Joab, Come near hither, that I may speak with thee. 17 And when he was come near unto her, the woman said, Art thou Joab? And he answered, I am he. Then she said unto him, Hear the words of thine handmaid. And he answered, I do hear. 18 Then she spake, saying, They were wont to speak in old time, saying, They shall surely ask counsel at Abel, and so they ended the matter. 19 I am one of them that are peaceable and faithful in Israel. Thou seekest to destroy a city, and a mother in Israel. Why wilt thou swallow up the inheritance of the Lord? 20 And Joab answered and said, Far be it from me, that I should swallow up or destroy. 21 The matter is not so, but a man of Mount Ephraim, Sheba the son of Bichri by name, hath lifted up his hand against the king, even against David. Deliver him only, and I will depart from the city. And the woman said unto Joab, Behold, his head shall be thrown to thee over the wall. 22 Then the woman went unto all the people in her wisdom. And they cut off the head of Sheba the son of Bichri, and cast it out to Joab. And he blew a trumpet, and they retired from the city, every man to his tent. And Joab returned to Jerusalem unto the king. We have here the conclusion of Sheba's attempt. 1. The rebel, when he had rambled over all the tribes of Israel, and found them not so willing, upon second thoughts, to follow him, as they had been upon a sudden provocation to desert David, having only picked up a few like himself, that sided with him, at length entered Abel Beth-maachah, a strong city in the north, in the lot of Naphtali, where we find it placed, 2 Kings 15 verse 29. Here he took shelter, whether by force or with consent does not appear, but his adherents were most Berites, of Beeroth and Benjamin, verse 14. One bad man will find or make more. 2. Joab drew up all his force against the city, besieged it, battered the wall, and made it almost ready for a general storm, verse 15. Justly is that place attacked with all this fury which dares harbor a traitor, nor will that heart fare better which indulges those rebellious lusts that will not have Christ to reign over them. 3. A discreet good woman of the city of Abel brings this matter, by her prudent management, to a good issue, so as to satisfy Joab and yet save the city. Here is 1. Her treaty with Joab and her capitulation with him, by which he is engaged to raise the siege, upon condition that Sheba be delivered up. It seems, none of all the men of Abel, none of the elders or magistrates, offered to treat with Joab, no, not when they were reduced to the last extremity. They were stupid and unconcerned for the public safety, or they stood in awe of Sheba, or they despaired of gaining any good terms with Joab, or they had not sense enough to manage the treaty. But this one woman and her wisdom saved the city. Souls know no difference of sexes. Though the man be the head, it does not therefore follow that he has the monopoly of the brains, and therefore he ought not, by any Salique law, to have the monopoly of the crown. Many a masculine heart, and more than masculine, has been found in a female breast, nor is the treasure of wisdom the less valuable for being lodged in the weaker vessel. In the treaty between this nameless heroine and Joab. 1. She gains his audience and attention, verses 16 and 17. We may suppose it was the first time he had ever treated with a woman in martial affairs. 2. She reasons with him on behalf of her city and very ingeniously. 1. That it was a city famous for wisdom, verse 18, as we translate it. She pleads that this city had been long in such reputation for prudent knowing men that it was the common referee of the country, and all agreed to abide by the award of its elders. Their sentence was an oracle, let them be consulted, and the matter is ended, all sides will acquiesce. Now shall such a city as this be laid in ashes and never treated with? 2. That the inhabitants were generally peaceable and faithful in Israel, verse 19. She could speak, not for herself only, but for all those whose cause she pleaded, that they were not of turbulent and seditious spirits, but of known fidelity to their prince and peaceableness with their fellow subjects, they were neither seditious nor litigious. 3. That it was a mother in Israel, a guide and nurse to the towns and country about, and that it was a part of the inheritance of the Lord, a city of Israelites, not of heathen, and the destruction of it would lessen and weaken that nation which God had chosen for his heritage. 4. That they expected him to offer them peace before he made an attack upon them, according to that known law of war, Deuteronomy 20 verse 10. So the margin reads, verse 18, they plainly spoke in the beginning of the siege, saying, surely they will ask of Abel, that is, the besiegers will demand the traitor, and will ask us to surrender him, and if they do, we will soon come to an agreement, and so end the matter. Thus she tacitly upbraids Joab for not offering them peace, but hopes it is not too late to beg it. 3. Joab enables advocates soon agree that Sheba's head shall be the ransom of the city. Joab, though in a personal quarrel he had lately swallowed up and destroyed Amasa, yet, when he acts as a general, will by no means bear the imputation of delighting in bloodshed. Far be it from me that I should delight to swallow up or destroy, or design it, but when it is necessary for the public safety, verse 20. The matter is not so. Our quarrel is not with your city, we would hazard our lives for its protection. Our quarrel is only with the traitor that is harbored among you, deliver him up, and we have done. A great deal of mischief would be prevented if contending parties would but understand one another. The city obstinately holds out, believing Joab aims at its ruin. Joab furiously attacks it, believing the citizens all confederates with Sheba. Whereas both were mistaken, let both sides be undeceived, and the matter is soon accommodated. The single condition of peace is the surrender of the traitor. It is so in God's dealing with the soul, when it is besieged by conviction and distress, sin is the traitor, the beloved lust is the rebel, part with that, cast away the transgression, and all shall be well. No peace on any other terms. Our wise woman immediately agrees to the proposal, behold, his head shall be thrown to thee presently. 2. Her treaty with the citizens. She went to them in her wisdom, and perhaps she had as much need of it in dealing with them as in dealing with Joab, and persuaded them to cut off Sheba's head, probably by some public order of their government, and it was thrown over the wall to Joab. He knew the traitor's face, and therefore looked no further, intending not that any of his adherents should suffer. The public safety was secured, and he felt no wish to gratify the public revenge. Joab hereupon raised the siege, and marched back to Jerusalem, with the trophies rather of peace than victory. David's court, 1023 BC. 23 Now Joab was over all the host of Israel, and Benaiah the son of Jehoiada was over the Cherethites and over the Pelethites, 24 And Aduram was over the tribute, and Jehoshaphat the son of Ahilud was recorder, 25 And Sheva was scribe, and Zadok and Abiathar were the priests, 26 And Ira also the Jairite was a chief ruler about David. Here is an account of the state of David's court after his restoration. Joab retained the office of general, being too great to be displaced. Benaiah, as before, was captain of the guards. Here is one new office erected, which we had not, chapter 8 verses 16 to 18, that of treasurer, or one over the tribute, for it was not till towards the latter end of his time that David began to raise taxes. Aduram was long in this office, but it cost him his life at last, 1 Kings 12 verse 18.